Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Dani Beaumont. Thank you for joining me today. You are here in, I'm checking chat real quick. Excellent. Good to know. Thanks, folks. You're joining me for a Muse Jam session. This is Muse Jam session recording 202. I am presenting both by way of Facebook, live, and in a screen sharing application called Zoom. As I present, I'm going to attempt to keep an eye on chat in the Zoom space and also comments in Facebook Live. So if you have questions as I go along, even if they don't relate to what I'm talking about, go ahead and put them in the comments area and I'll take them towards the end of the session. I began this session 2 weeks ago, Adobe Muse 101 Part 1, and I only got so far. So rather than rushing through a finish, I thought I would go ahead and break this into a 2-part series. So for this session, it's geared towards people that are new to Muse and just really letting you have a basic sense of how the tool works. The site that we're building, sort of the goal of what we're working on today, is this picnic website. I thought with summer here pretending to occur in San Francisco once the fog burns off, picnic seemed like a good idea. And this is an example of a responsive website. So what you'll notice is as I flip through pages here, the content, so for example, the navigation here, is going to adjust for smaller screens. So if I press and drag down to something like a tablet device, the navigation moves over for that. If I get even smaller on the page, notice that the navigation switches to something known as a mobile menu or a hamburger menu that you can jump between navigation pages. We are, as I mentioned, on our way to building this. If you're jumping in today and really wish you could see the first half, I encourage you to go to the Facebook video section, or also there's a YouTube channel for Adobe Muse where those recordings are available. You're welcome to scrub through the good parts and skip the other parts as you go along. Let's switch over to where we are in progress for this design. But as we work, I'm going to continue to refer to this finished design just as a goal as I build out the site elements. So I'll switch over into the Adobe Muse application. And as I mentioned, I've already gone in and created a new project. When I did that, I pulled under File here to New Site. And you'll notice that I have the ability to define if that site should be responsive or fluid in its width, fluid breakpoints, or fixed, basically kind of a standard page that's not going to flow its content based on breakpoints or based on devices. I selected a fluid width site, and I'm going to go ahead and cancel this out. And in that, I built out a number of pages and a master page. Now, master pages are used across a number of child pages. I'm going to take a quick look at chat here. Chris, you've missed a whole honker 4 minutes. You're good. Welcome aboard. So the way master pages work, one thing to mention is that Muse is modeled after InDesign, or a page layout application. So many of the metaphors that Adobe used in InDesign are leveraged within Muse. In the master page that I've built, I'm going to kind of zoom out on this page a little bit. You'll notice up here towards the top, I see that I have a breakpoint. That's my responsive space in essence, and it's set to 1200 pixels at a maximum. It has a minimum of 320, and that's probably the most terribly small phone that you'll find that run modern-day browsers these days. So that's the minimum width of my site, 1200 being the max. And I've built out some elements here so far. So I've added the Altura logo. I also placed header, basically just a rectangle here, and I filled that rectangle with a gradient to give it kind of a 3-dimensional effect to it. Now, if I select this item and actually look at some of the pinning attributes, that which controls which objects scroll or are fixed in their location, or if I'm resizing for the responsive behavior, how objects are hardwired or fixed to an edge or fluid in their design. And that's controlled through the pinning interface here. This top element is pinned to the top of the page, as is my navigation, is pinned to the right-hand side, and my logo is pinned to the left-hand side of the top of the browser. Another thing you'll notice is for each object, I can determine whether or not when the width of a browser changes, whether or not the placed element should scale should scale only in width, basically, so keep its height and be fluid width, or scale both height and width. The logo here on the left is set to scale, and I can see that in the drop-down menu here. By clicking on that resize drop-down, I can see it's set to be responsive width and height. Well, that can be good for something like a photo, but I really don't want my logo to scale. I don't want it to get incredibly small on a mobile phone, let's say, and large on a desktop device. So I'm going to change that setting to none, lock its height and width, and I know that it's now locked in position to the corner. When I select my navigation, I'll make sure that I have that same setting. It's not necessary that the width of my navigation really resize based on the width of the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and at least start with it set at none so that it will remain fixed. The container behind it here is set to be full browser width. That assures me that it's going to span the width of the browser no matter how wide that browser becomes. Same thing for the shadow below it. I want to make sure that is also set to full browser width and is pinned to the top of the page. So I have my navigation elements here. And if we go back to the live site instance, notice that When Is It has that blue color. If I roll over What's On, it has a very light shade of blue. Notice that the text also goes from black to white when it's active or in its normal state. This is standard practice around the web. It's something that if you're a very accomplished visual designer but new to the web, you need to really stop and learn. It's considered best practices on the web. What you want to really remember is that so many different people experience different websites, and they need some predictable means by which to navigate. It's as though you're renting a car, and when you hop in the car, the steering wheel is not where you would expect it, nor the brake or the clutch, let's say. It would be very disorienting. So letting users know where they are, when their cursor rolls over an object, giving them what's known as a hover state, allowing when they press the down button to show that something's actively being pressed, are all good best practices for design, and Muse allows you to do that easily. So let's go back and look at our navigation here. I did do some of this 2 weeks ago, but I kind of forgot where we are. So I'm going to click on the object. I want to select that menu. But one thing that's definitely a key learning in Adobe Muse is to understand where you are in a selection state of an object. So notice that I have nothing selected on the site right now, and it shows me that I'm at a page selection state. So with nothing selected, for example, I could come in and pick a different terrible browser fill color. That's going to apply to the entire page. I'm going to, of course, undo that. And what I want to do is instead select my menu. So I'm going to come over and click on that menu. Now, if I want to better see what's on the page, under View, I can go to Hide or Show Guides. And I can also hide or show frame edges. So notice when I show the frame edges, you can see where that menu is. I'm going to make it go away again, Control Command H on a Macintosh, because I know roughly where that guy is. I'm going to roll over it and click once to select it. And the selection state, I can see here on the left that the menu is selected. I'm going to click a second time to select just the individual menu item. And now I'm going to pull down under Window and select my States panel. And I'm going to actually drag that out onto the side. I kind of like to keep that available because it's something I want to have more constant to see each of the states. So with this object selected, notice I've got a rollover state, that lighter color. And the text is going from black to white. Mouse down is the same as rollover. I could give that a different shade if I wanted to. And the active state is that nice dark state. Now, the beauty of Muse is I just dragged this onto the canvas from the widgets library. I don't want to review too much of last time we spoke or else I'll run out of time again, but widgets are common web behaviors that can be configured and styled. So I selected a menu, dragged it out on the canvas, and styled it up. If I now go back to my site plan, I can do that by going to my workspace layout here on the right and clicking on Plan. Notice that you can kind of tell on these thumbnails that each of these have a different selection state. I can see that the navigation item is highlighted for each of those pages. I also have the ability at any time to see my work actually coded up in the browser without much effort. To do that, I can pull down under File and preview the entire site in the browser. Muse will go in and render the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It will also render what's known as graceful degradation. If I'm working on an older browser that doesn't support something like scalable vector graphics or CSS effects for this shadow here, Muse is generating fallback graphics for those older browsers. I've got some pretty good behavior going on. Here's my navigation. I can roll over those items. I can click to go to those pages, and I'm ready to populate more content. Now, we went into the second page, the What's On page, and we created 2 columns of text and a headline, and we created a paragraph style. Notice that things, as I resize the browser, they start to fall apart. That's okay. What we want to do is consciously add our elements, and then as we start to look at smaller devices, we will adapt the content for those smaller widths. Let's go back over here. Fall apart. That's okay. What we want to do is consciously add. I think I can mute that as long as I haven't muted everybody else. We'll be good. Take this thing out of my ear. Okay, so here we are on that Altura Picnic website, and we're ready to populate the second page with the text. So I'm going to switch over into Muse, and I mentioned that I have a master page. Let's see if I can put this guy away. The master page is here at the bottom, and it's called a master. I could override that and just call it main, just so I know that it's my master. Notice that the name updated up here, and every page within the site is using that main master. Now, there are times when you're designing a site that the landing page is going to be different than all the other pages in the site. You may have the same footer content for the entire site, different header on the main page and different header in the middle pages. You can nest master pages. You can inherit certain elements like a footer across 2 different pages. That's one of the nice features of the hierarchical structure here within the site plan. I'm good with the main master. I could press and drag to apply it if it wasn't already applied to a page, or just right-click and under Masters, select that one main master. Let's go on into our What's On page here. And I'm going to go ahead and show my guides. Now, as you work, if you're someone who likes to use a grid system, Muse does support that grid system. So if I hit Command- here, and were to right-click on these page properties, I could have done this at a site level when I said File New for my site, but I can also do it on an individual page level. Notice I can come in and define margins and columns. I might want to go with, let's go with a 4-column structure with padding of 20% or 20 pixels between each column. When I click OK now, I can see that column structure. It's pretty good. It may not lend itself exactly to our design, but we'll go with it. This is where you can tell I'm not a visual designer. I just play one on TV. So let's right-click again and go into page properties. Instead of 8 or 4, let's go with 8. A little bit better. What I want to do now is stretch out some of this content. So one of the nice things about Muse is that as I work, I can create styles that make it very, very easy to update content across a site, as though I were in Microsoft Word or InDesign. So in the last session, I created a headline, and if I open up paragraph styles, I saved out that subhead headline there as a style, and when I roll over that style, that paragraph style, I can see that it's got certain attributes. It's got a certain font that's being centered. I don't like the amount of leading between this headline here. So I'm going to go into my text panel, and real quickly, I'm going to just change this to about 100% height. And I'll hit return. So it's tightening up that subhead for me a little bit. When I go now back to the paragraph styles, what you'll notice is it's still indicating that I've selected that subhead style, but it's put a plus sign in there. If I roll over it, I see that indeed it's using that standard style, but it now has a variant of a tighter leading or spacing between the lines. I want to override the style to make sure it includes that change for any other instance that I create a style as I'm working or create subheads throughout the site. So to do that, I'll right-click here, and I'm just going to select Redefine Style. So I could clear the change, I could clear the override, or redefine it so it's used throughout the rest of the site. That's exactly what I wanted. Now I'm going to select this item, and I'm just going to drag the edges out a little bit more. and make sure that it's centered with my guides. Now I'm holding the Option key down. It's a nice way to grow a container both on the left and the right. I'll select these two guys. I'd like to stretch them out as well. And you'll notice based on my selection, I can control the elements differently. If I select one item here, little rectangles show up or squares on all sides. If I select two objects, the group is selectable or controllable by these little diamonds in between the objects. That allows me to come in and just grab both of these and stretch them out until they nicely fit in the new space that I've defined. Okay, so I've got a headline, I've got some text. We're trying to model this after the live site. So another thing we're missing is a bit of a graphic here. Now, when we talk about graphics, there's a few ways you can work. I encourage you, if you're new to Muse and really want to check into this, there are jam sessions that I've given that just talk about different document types. In a nutshell, you want to save everything as resolution independently as possible and as high res as possible without actually worrying about the load time on your website. When it comes to images, Muse is going to take responsibility for subsetting that image to the resolution of your device. When you set up a site, you can choose if you want it to support Retina, high DPI devices, or just standard. If you go with Retina, Muse is going to load the small version of an image, and then when the bandwidth is there, bring in the higher res version, so that if you're on a slow connection, there's no real consequence to that higher res version. You can set it up that way, and it, as I mentioned, will load quickly still on those standard devices and the high-res devices. But images are resolution dependent, right? When you place them, it's a photo at maybe 10 megapixels from your iPhone 7, let's say. When it comes to text, that's usually resolution independent. So if I hit Command minus a whole lot, no matter how much I zoom in on this text, it's going to remain really clean and clear. And that's because it's resolution independent. Let's just go back now and view at actual size. When it comes to line art, the web has evolved to support something known as scalable vector graphics, or SVG. SVGs are like text. They're resolution independent. Now, I want to come introduce a graphic here. And there's a nice feature in Muse that's really terrific. We added it when we started to have very long responsive design pages. And that's one, it's called the vertical move handle. I had to call it a vertical love handle for a while before I could remember. But if I click on any one object, on the left-hand side here, I can see the vertical move handle. I can now press and drag that guy out of the way. And the next thing I want to do is introduce a graphic. Now, I built this site out with a designer, of course, some time ago. And to do that, we shared a Creative Cloud library of elements. So I'm going to leverage that. I'm going to come to the CC Libraries folder here, and I'll make sure I'm on the Altura design. I've got a few of them, as you can tell here. Let's try Altura Dani. Notice that in this library, I have colors that were brought over from other applications. I have elements that were brought over from other applications. So all of the icons, the graphics that you see here, were actually originally created in Adobe Illustrator. When I was in Illustrator, all I had to do was really press and drag an object from Illustrator into the library. The clipboard, or the means by which that's copied from Illustrator into the Creative Cloud, supports Muse at something known as a scalable vector graphic format, or SVG. You don't need to worry about that or do anything. When you drag it over or add it into the library, that clipboard layer is available for Muse. So if I want to come in, I think I've got those little flags here somewhere. How about we'll go with money or magic? Let's do a little money. So I'm going to just come in and grab this item. And there's a couple ways you can place content. If I click and release, it'll place it at its original size. Maybe not. If I come in and let's do that again. If instead I press and drag, it's going to scale that content until it gets to be a size that I'd like it to be. I can now place this object. Now let's say I'm looking at the object and I want to make a change. I don't have to go back to the source Illustrator file because this is in the Creative Cloud library and it's tagged as an Illustrator document. I could just right-click here and select Edit. The Creative Cloud is going to go look at the authoring application, Illustrator, and open it up, and I can then come in and make changes. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Let's go back and look. So we've got some dots and we've got money. Let's say we decided that the dots were a little distracting. We didn't like them. I think I'll save my net score there for another time. Let's say I decided these dots were just a little much. And this is also where I hardly know how to use Illustrator anymore. All right, so I'm going to delete those dots. I don't want them. And I'm just going to pull down on File to save. And if I go back over into Muse, nothing's changed on the canvas because that would be a little disturbing if it just suddenly changed because something outside of the application changed. But if I come into my Assets panel here within Muse, I can see that that icon money has a little cloud with an exclamation point saying, you know what, it's changed, basically. If I right-click on that object, I believe, let's see, and say Update Asset, it's going to update the instant of that asset without the dots. So I have this beautiful, almost smart objects if you come from the old school of Adobe, but I have this connection to source applications and source content for the placed instances in the site. Now, if I had placed this logo 6 times in the site, I could see all instances here in the Assets panel and actually go to each one to confirm perhaps that change had been made. All right, I'm going to eat up all the time again. I got to pump out this site a little bit. So here I have that logo. I also want it to not resize, so I'm going to set that to none. And generally speaking, I'm going to want it and the headline to be centered on the page. Now, I'll tell you this up front. When it comes to pinning objects in responsive design, you just need to experiment. I try to predict how something's going to behave, but I don't always really know until I see it in action. The best thing to do is kind of not pin anything until you look at it in the browser, and then we'll experiment. So I'm going to leave these alone. I've got 2 text containers. And if we go back to our guide again, let's go back to the site, we can see that when I press and drag, after a certain point, those containers start to flow amongst themselves. So the container grows, and the content of the text, it's not scaling to become smaller. It's kind of stacking on itself. The other magical thing is notice that RSVP, well, there's 2 things to notice about the RSVP Today button. One is that it moves out of the way. See how it's pushing down? The other is that because it's set to be fluid width, I'm getting a terrible behavior that I hate, which is my button is scaling in its width. So I need to go back to the source website, the original design, and fix that because I never really want my buttons to stack. It's kind of a bad behavior. Staying on task, though, I've got this nice little button here. So as I roll over this button, notice that some kind of disco things happen to that button. It's changing from red to green, and you may not see this on my screen sharing, but it's actually fading between those colors. There's a couple ways that you can build out buttons within Muse. I'm going to take a very simple approach and just come on in and just draw a container here. I'm going to draw it up here on the top. And I'll go in and just type in RSVP. I can do it this way, RSVP Today. If I could spell. Now it's all lowercase, but I can come into the text panel and I have some good text controls. Make it all caps. I can come in and fill my container with the red color. Notice that I don't have a lot of swatches in here yet. I can come in and set certain attributes. So I'm going to show you how to do this real quick, and then we're going to do a little bit of magic. I'm going to round out the corners. And let's say that I am really trying to leverage an existing site, and I don't have a lot of specifications for that site. I'm going to go back to that live site, and I'm a big fan of a screen capture tool. I use something called Snagit on the Mac. I've been really pleased with it lately. I'm going to come on in. I'm just going to grab that very bright button there and copy it. I'm just going to go back over into Muse, and I'll paste it in. And I want to grab that color red. So I've got my still misspelled RSVP. There we go. And I know that if I type T on the keyboard, I can center the text. I'll probably want to come into the spacing panel a little bit and just add a little bit of padding up towards the top. And I'm going to want to select a typeface. So I'm just going to guess if I've got body text here that's EFRA light. I can come to this guy, select it all, and again, make sure I have that EFRA light font selected, maybe medium for a button. Let's go ahead and guess at that. And I'll change that background fill by using an eyedropper tool and just kind of dropping it here on the canvas. I'm going to jump around a little bit today as usual, but one thing I want to show you, a nice tool that I found. I use Chrome on the Mac, and there's this really cute little tool that allows you, if I roll over, it's called Colorzilla. It allows you to go in and inspect. I can pick any color on this page and just click on it and get the RGB values right there. It'll copy it to the clipboard for me. So that's another way to pick on color. Another one is this font plugin called WhatFont. And it would allow me to come in and just tag individual items, and I can see exactly this is the EFRA font. It's at a normal weight of 300 at 16 pixels and a line height of 19. I could keep doing that to just inspect a site until I determine the typographic attributes and the colors that are being used. So really nice when you're trying to recreate a site that perhaps you don't have the source code for. So I think we decided that's EFRA at 16 pixels in height. So I'll come on in. I'm going to not use the medium color. I'll go ahead and go back to the light instance. And we're going to set it to 16. And we're going to also set that to white. All right, that was how I would go about building this button. That's the first state of the button. So if I came and put it alongside my little screen capture goal here, I can bring this down a little bit. That looks a little small from a screen capture standpoint. I think it's about 60% of actual size. But I could then go on here in the rollover state and just change it to a green color. I'm going to cheat a little bit now that I've shown you how to do that. I'm going to go into the CC library and I'm going to look for the button. Now, CC libraries are swell. You can search from within an individual library. You can search all the libraries you have available, or even search for stock images or vector graphics in Adobe stock. I want to search within the current library. I think BTN is how I named it. Maybe not. Maybe I don't have it. Let's do this. Let's go across all libraries because I have a few Alturas. Button seems right to me. There you go. All right, this may not be the right button, but we're going to give it a go. Let's see. Pre-order. It's the wrong button. That's okay. We're going to undo what we did and just create a button. Easy enough. All right, so I've got my RSVP today. I want to grab that nice green shade, though, now as well. So let's clear back out here. I've got a nice shade of green. So with that button selected, in the rollover state, so with this state selected, I'm going to come to my fill color, and I'll just grab this lighter shade of green. Probably not the one that's on the live site, but that's okay. So there's my normal state, my rollover state, down and active. Now, if you remember, I mentioned about how there was a nice gradient or transition. Muse supports JavaScript transitions or CSS transitions. It's probably CSS, but if I select this object, it doesn't really matter to me what the code is. I can just go under the transition dropdown and select that I want it to fade between transitions and how long the duration of that fade should be with some other attributes. So I now have a button here, and I know that I want that button to take me somewhere. Muse supports hyperlinks in a variety of ways. Now, I can link to an email if I had this object selected. I go to the hyperlinks area. So notice if I don't have an object selected, I'm not going to see the hyperlinks panel or the hyperlinks area, which can be frustrating. It's very context specific. If I click on an object that can be linked to, I can see hyperlinks. In the drop-down area, I have the ability to come in and edit the look of link styles. I can create a variety of styles, and I can link to different locations. I can link to other pages on the site, like the RSVP page. If I wanted to, I could link to a phone number just by typing tel and a phone number. If I did SMS and colon, it would cause it to bring up a text messaging application on a mobile device. I can also say mail to and send it to an email address. I can control the header of that email, all sorts of stuff. For now, I'm going to go ahead and actually have it go to that RSVP page, and I'm going to move this into position. Next thing I want to do is deal with this grid of images that are here. Let's get rid of that font selection. I am going to stop for a second and see how chat is doing, just real quick to make sure I haven't lost anybody too much. So one question, is this a new version of Muse? It is not, sadly. Engineering is headlong into some pretty severe work in Muse, and we've got a private beta going on. If you come to museprerelease.com and you have an Adobe ID, you can come join that beta. I invite you to come on in. There's some really nice enhancements underway, but this is the shipping version we're looking at right now. Okay, looks like people are pretty happy, so I'm going to keep going because I can't I can't do this for 3 weeks in a row. It's just not possible. All right, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to bring in a background image. I am going to be a little rougher about this because time's slipping away. I'm going to come and drag in page gallery. And this might be a total cheat. I just want the background image. So what I have is an image. It's one thing that I've done that's something that happens a lot. I dragged that image towards the bottom of the page. The Muse team, including me, thought it would be really clever to have anything that's dragged below this footer line, the bottom area, tagged as a footer element. Let me show you why that's really odd. So I put this cute little image here at the bottom, and I pull down on File to preview the page. And when I take a look, I've got some stuff here, but notice how that page, no matter what I do, it's kind of hanging off the bottom, and I can't scroll down to get there. It just won't work. It's because it's tagged as a footer, and footer elements are designed to stay below all of the active page content in your site. So if I come over here and select that object and uncheck the footer part, it's going to slide back inside the active page content. So just be careful when you're dragging items out that you're doing things the right way. I want to grab some of the photos now. So let's see if I've got some of these. I'm just going to try to be bulky quick about this. So I've got image of kid eating something lovely. I'll drag that on the canvas. I want this to be more of a square-like experience. So I'm going to come in and actually try that again. I'll show you some fun features from Muse. If I come into the transform panel, obviously I'm going to go off in the weeds here and not build an entire site, because as much as I try to discipline myself, I'm just going to show you some tricks at the same time and eat up probably more than I should for our time. I've got an object that's a width of 402 and a height of 267. I've got this guy right here, which is a height of 440, let's say. I can use some nice simple math to work now for my complex brain. I'd like to have images that are 4 across and 2 down, basically for my grid design. So we've got 440 by 1200. I want this guy to basically be 1200 divided by 4. I want it to be 1/4 of the width of the site. Now that was a dumb thing to do because it's skewing things a little bit. Let's see if I can get this a little more the way I want it to be. I'm going to lock my dimensions. Let's try that way. And I'm going to say take the 1200 width and divide it by 4. I want it to be 1/4 of the width of my current page. The height is at 200, and this is at 440. So I want it to be more like 210. I can come in and just drag. Let's see if I undo that. If I hold the Option key and press and drag, not the Option key, let's try it again, the Command key, and press and drag, notice that I can grow the height. I'm looking at my reading there, basically growing the image container to be, let's see if I can get it. All right, I'm going to do this, set it at 210. And then the next thing I can do is zoom in on this guy. And this is basically a mask if you're used to layout applications, where I can come in and control how much of that image is showing up within that mask container. All right, so I have now an object that fits on my page here. I'm going to zoom back in here a little bit. And I'll type V on the keyboard to change to a control key. I now kind of have, see if this fits my grid. It may not, but that's okay. We're going to play a little bit. Sorry, jumping around today. All right. I'm going to get this guy in here. And just going to duplicate it out a bit. I just want to create a bit of a sloppy grid. So what I'm doing is holding some command keys, kind of standard Adobe control keys that will allow these guys to line up pretty well. And I'm going to take these, let's just take these two alternating images and move them down. Pretty good, a little on the short side, so I'm going to make up for it in that way. So I now have kind of a grid going on here. If I go back out to the CC libraries, I think I've got some other tiles. We have the blast off image. I'm just going to place that on the canvas. Has nothing to do with picnics, but there you go. I'm going to right click and I'm going to cut that onto the clipboard, come to another image, and I'll right click again and I'm going to paste as a background image. Actually, I'm not because I'm being a goofball. Let's try this for a second. I do want these to be, thinking to myself, there are different ways that images can fill a container. If I come in and create just a container and place an image inside of it, so if I copy this one, let's say copy, and go to that container, when I paste it as a background image, what it allows me to do is some cool things like scale to fill the container, like this, right? I can also control how it's placed within that container. And that's going to work well if we go back to our original design. Notice that as I play with the width of the site, see how at some point those images are scaling in their width. They're set as background images that allows me to do that particular scale. So I'm going to kind of take that approach. So rather than placing the image, I basically pasted that image as a background on my page. But I'll tell you what, that's going to allow me to do the magic I was trying to do before a little more easily. So this guy we decided is 1200 by 420. I want this one to be 1200 divided by 4. And then I want this to be basically 420 divided by 2. So it will fit that container really well. This is why what I was doing earlier was failing miserably. Dupe these guys out again rather quickly. And let's alternate them. Okay. With them all selected now, I want to check my resize features. So as I mentioned, these designs are minimizing in their width. I can control that here by selecting responsive width or width and height. I like responsive width. And I'm going to make sure these guys are not pinned in any way. And let's just go ahead and preview the page and see what that does for us. So I'm going to pull that on file to preview the page in the browser. I encourage you to take the time to come in and preview as you're working. It's a great way. Whether or not Muse could or should be simpler to use, I think, is an open question. The beauty of Muse is that it just really allows you to visually design things so quickly and then see the rules of the web in action by previewing it in the browser. So these are not rules that Adobe writes. The web is open standards. And the fact that Muse allows you to see behaviors so quickly, I think, is so amazing. So notice how I'm getting the behavior I want with my images. It's reducing the width of the image, but not its height. So now I'm going to come in and just grab a couple more graphics that I can place in to vary that up. And then we're going to move on to a couple more pages. So I'm going to be rather random about this. I'm just going to click and paste it. I'm going to then cut it to the clipboard, come to one of these objects, right-click, and paste as a background image. I can control how that scale to fill is working, if there's parts of the image I'd rather have in there as I'm going. Let's do this a couple more times. This is our land. That's fine. I've got a little picnic basket. Cut that to the clipboard. You know, there's probably even, I bet you there's a grown-up way of doing this. If I select this image here and come to this guy, let me just see. Oh, yeah. This was a feature we didn't have, and now we do, and I'm used to the old world. Some of you perhaps are scratching your head, but let's say I come here to this image. I can just go to the one that I want, right-click, and say set as the fill. It's a lot easier than pasting it onto the page and cutting it to the clipboard. Yeah, let's do that one more time. See, there's features even I have to learn still. Let's do that image blast off for some reason. We'll go ahead and set that as the fill for that active container. Okay, so we got some pretty good stuff going on this page. Let's go ahead and look a little further. So notice that my RSVP button and everybody is behaving badly. And that has to do with the hierarchical structure of the site. I've placed these elements, but when I placed them, I put them on top of my navigation. And I really don't want that. So what I can do is go back to my site plan. And if we take a look at the master page, let's get the states panel off to the side for now. I've got these elements here, and if I go to the layers panel, you'll notice I have this default layer 1. What I want to do is come in and double click on that, and I want to give it a name. I'm going to call it top nav. And I will come in and right click and select all on the page. Actually, if I just pull that on file to select all, edit. I usually do this as a keyboard command here. We'll just call it Command A to select all. And then when I right click, I'm going to make sure that in the layers panel that it is all on that same layer. Now I only have one layer, so it can't be anywhere else. Let's go ahead and add a second layer. I'm going to come down in the layers panel to add a new layer, and I'm going to name this page content and click OK. I'm going to press and drag that down so that the top nav elements, all of the elements on the page, are going to sit on top of anything that's active page content. Now that I have more than one layer, I can right-click on an object and notice that I can move to one layer or another, right, by selecting the object and moving it. I'll leave that in its default state, and I'm going to go back to the site plan mode and double-click on this page that I've just been working on. Now I want to come in and select all, Command A, everything on the page right now. And when I right-click, I'm going to go ahead and move that to the page content layer. And now when I preview in the browser, as I scroll, my navigation does not move. It stays in the background. And my good content here, with that little slow fade button, is all layering underneath my navigation. If I press and drag, I start to see the responsive behavior. Let's go ahead and populate out another page. I'm going to hit a Command M, that takes me back to my site plan. And we've got RSVP and then location. Where is it? I can press and drag these, by the way, into new locations. It's going to automatically update the navigation for me. I don't have to worry about making that change. Let's go ahead and look at the Where Is It page and see what we've got on that page. So I'll jump over to Where Is It? And I see we've got a few elements. These should all be rather familiar to you at this point. I'm going to come in and just be lazy. I'm going to select some text and copy it. Come back to this page. And I'm just pasting plain old text. This could have been from a Word document. Really does not matter much. I'm going to grow these guys out. Now I could make this a separate text container, or it can be one text container. It really doesn't matter either. I'm going to select the top text here, my subhead, and in my paragraph styles, I'll go on in and set that as a subhead. I'll go into my body text and set that as body text. Now it looks like on this page, oddly enough, everything is centered. So I'll come in and select all there and go ahead and center it. What you'll notice is now if I were to hover over one of these, I have that paragraph style with the exception, that centering that's being held there. So that's perfect. I want to come in and add a map now. So if you'll notice, we can add that graphic real quick too. I'll grab this object, grab my little vertical move handle, drag it down, and let's see if I can get a graphic. Got some funny little map versions here. I'll go ahead and put this one in. And I'm going to press and drag that to about the size that I want. And I'll place it towards the center. Next thing I want to do is add that map. So we've got a map here. You'll notice that I live in San Francisco and I've tagged a whole lot of locations, and that's where the picnic is here in town. I want to include that map. So what I can do is go to the regular widget library that's built into the tool. And I'm going to go over to social. And in social, there is a Google map. And just press and drag. Now, as we know, I'm not going to drag it down into the footer. That'll confuse me. Just a little higher on the page to place that map. And with that map here on the canvas, as I mentioned, widgets are configurable and stylable. I can come on in and set this to stretch the browser width, no matter how wide that is. Notice that it takes a moment to render, and things are rendering there on the canvas. This is because it's dynamic data out on the World Wide Web that's being populated to my page as I'm working. So sometimes it needs a second. We'll generate what's known as a poster image, which might be just for position only. For example, if I come in and grab this SVG and make it really large, it may be jaggedy looking for just a second while we go off and render that scalable vector graphic by looking at the code. So Muse is attempting to give you a good sense of what's going on, but sometimes we approximate it. With this map now selected, I want to go to Sharon Meadow. So we'll try Sharon Meadow, San Francisco. Don't know if that's going to work. And I can set the zoom level for that object as well. All right, there we are in Sharon Meadow. Looks a little, never know which direction to go here. Let's try 15. We'll probably see the entire, oh, that's good. All right, so I've now added a map. Again, let's stop and take a look at our work. Now I've placed this content on the canvas. I want to check the scale or the fluid behavior of each of these objects. Let's leave them as not scaling and not centered at the moment and come in and preview that page. All right, we're starting to pick up speed a little bit here. So we've got that map. And as I resize, notice things are going a little wacko because I haven't pinned these objects or determined how they should flow, but I've got that map and it's in position for me. All right, let's go one step further. All right, I'm gonna do a bad quick job of this. We're gonna go back to the master, and I want to add. I'm hesitant, as you can tell. We have a contact form that's here. It's nothing extraordinary as far as how you build out that contact form, but I'm going to skip it for now so that we don't spend too much time on it. So here, if you'll notice RSVP, we have a form. It's a standard contact form. We're going to skip that page for the moment because I do want to show you a little bit about the responsive behavior that you'll want as you work on the page. So let's go to the second page here. Now that I've set up pretty much my desktop design, I've previewed it in the browser, everything's looking pretty good to me, I can start to determine how I want the content to behave when things become more crowded or smaller in smaller browsers. So the way you want to do that is here in the design canvas, you'll want to make sure under view that you have breakpoints visible. So I don't want to hide them. I want them to be visible. I can see my default breakpoint here. And what you'll notice is I've gone in and pinned these objects. If you remember, the logo's on the left, the navigation here is on the right. As I grab what's known as the gripper here, I can start to see how these objects will respond in the browser. Now, the rule when it comes to defining breakpoints is, in the world of Muse, is when your design breaks, it's time for a breakpoint. Now, the truth is when you're setting up a master page and you have navigation at the top of the page, you'll probably define a breakpoint that works well on tablet, another one that works well on desktop, and another one that works well on a touch device like an app, mobile device like a phone, a smartphone. But when it comes to page content, you really want to focus on your content. So to illustrate this a little bit, I'm going to come into these top objects, all the ones that really should remain in the center, and I'll select them. And I'm going to come in and pin them towards the center of the site. I've got these two columns. I'm going to leave them unpinned because I know where we're headed and I don't want to pin them. I'm going to just leave them unpinned. And then once again, I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see this a little bit better. As I press and drag, I want to look at the behavior of my content. Well, things are looking pretty good, except my text is starting to step all over itself. But the other items are staying, and I'm not looking at the photos at the bottom quite yet. The other items are starting to look pretty good until things get a little crowded, and that column's driving me crazy there. So I'm going to jump back out to my breakpoint, and I'll come in and select, with the Shift key, my two text containers. And I want to go ahead and set that to be responsive width. I'll still leave it unpinned. And I'm going to press and drag to see what happens now. Notice that the text containers are starting to flow. And depending on how far I go there, it'll start to move the content below it. Remember that terrible button behavior in the live site? There's the culprit. I want to come in and select the button and make sure that it is set to not scale height nor width, and press and drag. Now, when things start to get a little crowded to where it's just not going to be a pleasant design anymore, I can come in and add a breakpoint. So my design is about to break is the way I look at it. And then I can come in and change behaviors. I can decide if a headline should stack upon itself. I can come in and move text objects. And instead of having them side by side, let's try that again. I can stack them amongst themselves here. Oh, goodness. Third time's going to be the charm. Select both of these guys and center them roughly. And go ahead and resize them. Let's try that one more time. I'm going to resize them with the Command key held down so that they'll grow. Actually, just leave it at this. I think it's the Option key. But I now have a nice behavior for that second breakpoint. So as I'm working now, if I jump to my largest breakpoint and press and drag, things are good. Getting a little crowded for my taste. Notice up there in that breakpoint bar, boom, I jump to the next breakpoint where I have a little bit more room for my content to flow. And from there, you continue to experiment with each individual item within a breakpoint. When your design is getting crowded, it's about to break, you go ahead and break it. Well, guess what? I'm going to need to break because we're out of time again. But I hope this has been just a nice way to sort of whet your appetite around Muse and get a sense of how it's such a visual design tool and really robust and easy to work with. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to go to muse.adobe.com. This is the landing page here. There's a tab for tutorials, and in it are lots and lots of very quick tutorials, little 5-minute videos. There's also all of the historical deeper dives that are available under the events page. So if you missed Muse 101 Part 1, you can watch that here in this area. Muse 101 Part 2 is going to be up there shortly. I'll be back likely in 2 weeks. And I thank you all for spending this hour with me. And we hope to see you again soon.